4th of October 2011. Charlie was 10 years old. It was midweek, and as such he didn't have a birthday party because we saved it for the weekend. And on the Friday night, which was the 7th of October, it was about 9:45 in the evening when Charlie made his way upstairs as normal, but to brush his teeth and get himself ready for bed. Jan and I tidied up, and at about 10 past 10 went upstairs and brushed our teeth and went to bed. We were in bed, I expect, for about 5 minutes, and we just drifted off, and all of a sudden we were woken by our daughter Izzy, who was screaming and running into our bedroom. And she was just screaming that Charlie, he was kicking her, he wasn't responding, and his eyes had rolled into the back of his head. I jumped up, ran into Charlie's room, and at that point Charlie was having a seizure. I grabbed hold of Charlie, lifted him up and laid him in the landing. Jan rang 999. So with that I put him into the recovery position, and I laid on the floor next to him, and I held his hand and I was talking to him and had no response. His eyes were still rolled back. Charlie remained in that unresponsive state, although still jerking somewhat, but unable to respond to anything I said to him or any reaction to me squeezing his hands or anything. And there was a series then of questions relayed from Jan to myself and then back to the 99 handler. And at one point Charlie squeezed my hand, and the right hand side of his face had completely dropped. His face had completely distorted, and then he stopped responding again to me. And then all of a sudden he completely snapped and opened his eyes and looked at me, and he was sort of with us but unable to speak, and at that point the paramedic arrived.
And she asked us what had happened, and she said, I think he's probably overheated or something. I said, he's been okay during the day, he's not been poorly. We've just really gobsmacked by having just witnessed our perfectly healthy little boy just completely collapsed on the floor, unconscious, in front of our eyes.
Eventually we sat Charlie up. There was a quick check of his temperature, his pulse, and at that stage the paramedic told us that they believed that Charlie had had a febrile convulsion, and I didn't know what that was and asked what it was. I asked at that point, would he need to be going to hospital, because obviously it's his first time, we've never seen it before. And they said no, it's quite a common thing for children, and this can happen several times and that there's no need to convey. However, if you feel that he's not well through the night or it happens again, then call us or take him direct to A&E. And that was it really. That was the end of their response.
We were really concerned because we'd never seen either of our children so desperately poorly. So again, I said, but he's not, you can see he's not right. And they said, oh, there's nothing wrong with him, he's absolutely fine. I said, but surely he should be going to hospital, he needs to be checked over. No, you go to hospital with him and they'll just carry out exactly the same checks as we've carried out. And they made us feel that we had wasted their time by calling the emergency services.
The seizure lasted about 12 minutes. where he was totally unresponsive. Not content with what had happened, we kept Charlie in. He had a headache through that day, and then Jan booked us to go and see his doctor on Monday, and I took Charlie along. Charlie then sat with the doctor and myself, and he explained what had happened, that he could remember. The doctor then examined him and said that he thought perhaps he was suffering from nocturnal epilepsy. They gave us a form that would allow us to book him in for a urgent neurological appointment, and the earliest we could get was for 6 weeks later. On the Tuesday,
said goodnight to him, then came back downstairs, just that we had an hour catch up before we went to bed, which is what we did. So we went upstairs, you opened.
I went into Charlie's room, opened the door, and he was in exactly the same position as he was when he went to bed. And I always went across every evening and ruffled the top of his head, give him a kiss and said good night.
So he went in and said good night, ruffled his head, and his head just moved further into the pillow. Dad screamed at me, Jan, call the ambulance, call 999. I said, has it happened again? He said it has. He pulled Charlie out. He'd been sick. He'd bitten his tongue, so there was blood all over the pillow. We called 999. He stayed on the phone with me the whole time, telling Baz the compressions to do CPR. Charlie was completely unresponsive this time, wasn't breathing, and the first lot came in the house, then a second lot came into the house, and I could hear discussions about an air ambulance as well. They wanted him transmitted as quickly as possible. We jumped in the car. We couldn't go in the ambulance because there were too many people trying to get Charlie into the ambulance, and we just drove straight to the hospital ahead of the ambulance, and we got there as the ambulance pulled up. The A&E consultants and the A&E team were ready for us. They just moved us slightly to one side, and as they pulled Charlie off the ambulance, they were still doing CPR on him, and we knew that this was not good at all. The team started to work on him, and they hit the clock for a countdown, and the A&E consultant kept coming over to us periodically, giving us an update, what medicine they were giving him. They were trying to suction the vomit out from him still. And they said to us, we're going to try one last burst of adrenaline. He said, you need to prepare yourself though, Charlie is desperately, desperately ill. And they did the one last burst of adrenaline. And we stood in A&E and we watched our little boy die. 10 minutes after he'd been pulled off an ambulance, they pronounced Charlie dead. So our beautiful, gorgeous little boy, 4 days after being misdiagnosed by 2 ambulance crew, was dead.